UFC and its journey of becoming the biggest MMA brand can make the most inspirational movie of all time. The business was acquired in 2001 by Dana White and Frank and Lorenzo Fertitta for only $2 million. They were given nothing more than the UFC trademark and an octagon, and they proceeded to lose nearly $50 million over the course of the next 3 years. But today the business is worth an estimated $10 billion, and it's one of the fastest growing sports leagues globally. But how did they manage to do that? How did a college dropout make a dead business the biggest of its kind? Welcome to Fight World News, and today we'll be talking about how Dana White made UFC the biggest brand in MMA. When Dana White first became involved with the UFC in 2001, the organization was in dire straits. The sport of MMA was still relatively unknown and was often viewed as barbaric and brutal. The UFC was struggling financially with little mainstream recognition or support. However, White saw the potential in MMA and believed that the UFC could become a legitimate mainstream sport. One of the first things White did to transform the UFC was to improve the quality of the fights. He implemented a series of rules and regulations, including weight classes and time limits, that made the sport safer and more exciting to watch. He also recruited top fighters from around the world, including Royce Gracie, Chuck Liddell, and Tito Ortiz. In addition to improving the quality of the fights, White was a master at marketing the UFC. He recognized that to attract mainstream audiences, he needed to make the fights more accessible to the general public. He began by creating a reality TV show called The Ultimate Fighter. The show followed a group of fighters as they trained and competed for a UFC contract. The show was a rip-roaring success and helped to introduce the sport to a wider audience. White was also a master at creating rivalries and building hype for fights. He was known for his trash talking and his ability to get under his opponent's skin. This led to some of the most memorable moments in UFC history, including the feud between Tito Ortiz and Ken Shamrock. Another key factor in the UFC's success was its ability to adapt to changing circumstances. When MMA was banned in many states, White and the UFC team worked tirelessly to persuade lawmakers to lift the bans. They also worked with athletic commissions to establish rules and regulations that would make the sport safer and more acceptable to the public. White was also not afraid to take risks. In 2011, he made the controversial decision to purchase Strikeforce, one of the UFC's main competitors. The move allowed the UFC to consolidate its position as the dominant MMA company and gave it access to Strikeforce's roster of top fighters. Another key factor in the UFC's success was its partnership with Reebok. In 2015, the UFC signed a 6-year deal with the sports apparel company to provide all of the fighters with uniforms. This move not only gave the UFC a more professional look, but also helped to increase its revenue. White's leadership and management style have also played a significant role in the UFC's success. He has been described as a tough negotiator and a shrewd businessman, with a deep understanding of the sport and its fans. He's also known for his loyalty to the fighters and his willingness to stand up for them in negotiations with sponsors and media companies. However, White's success has not been without controversy. He has been accused of mistreating fighters, underpaying them, and creating a culture of bullying within the organization. In addition, there have been concerns about the safety of the sport, with some critics arguing that it is too violent and should be banned. Despite these challenges, there is no denying that Dana White has transformed the UFC into a global phenomenon. His ability to market the sport, create hype for fights, and take risks has made him a legendary figure in the world of sports. As the UFC continues to grow and evolve, it will be interesting to see how White and his team continue to adapt to changing circumstances and maintain the UFC's position as the biggest brand in MMA. Another thing that we must talk about is how some UFC fighters helped Dana build this business. How their fame impacted the growth of UFC. The first and major name is of course Conor McGregor. McGregor is one of the biggest stars in the history of UFC, and his contributions to the growth of the organization cannot be overstated. McGregor burst onto the scene in 2013 with his explosive knockout power and charismatic personality, quickly establishing himself as a fan favorite. One of the ways in which McGregor helped to make the UFC big was by bringing in new fans who may not have been interested in MMA before. His brash, outspoken personality and extravagant lifestyle were a stark contrast to the humble, hard-working image of many MMA fighters. McGregor's trash-talking and bravado made him a polarizing figure, but also a highly entertaining one. This, in turn, helped to bring new viewers to the UFC who were drawn to his larger-than-life persona. We'll talk about McGregor's influence in detail in some another video. Another name is of Anderson Silva, who is the first superstar coming out of UFC. Silva is widely regarded as one of the greatest MMA fighters of all time, and he played a significant role in making the UFC a bigger and more mainstream brand. First and foremost, Silva's in-cage performances were nothing short of spectacular. He dominated the middleweight division for years, winning 16 consecutive fights and defending his belt a record 10 times. Silva's success also helped to bring international attention to the UFC. He was born and raised in Brazil, and his rise to prominence helped to put the spotlight on Brazilian MMA and the UFC's efforts to expand its global reach. Silva's success helped to inspire a new generation of fighters in Brazil and other countries, and helped to establish the UFC as a truly international brand. These two, along with some other UFC names, made UFC what it is now. But the question is where they would have been if Dana hadn't signed them. Dana White's leadership and vision were instrumental in transforming the UFC from a niche combat sport into a global powerhouse. Through his tireless work ethic, savvy business sense, and willingness to take risks, White helped to elevate the sport and the UFC to new heights of popularity and success. He was not afraid to make bold moves, whether it was expanding the brand globally, introducing new weight classes, or embracing social media and digital marketing. Dana White's legacy as the driving force behind the UFC's growth and success will continue to be felt for generations to come. And with that, it's time for us to call it a day. But we do hope that you liked the video and found it informative. Subscribe to our channel and don't forget to click the bell icon. Your valuable suggestions are very important to us, so do post them in the comment section. And I'll see you in the next video.